So, good evening, everybody. It's wonderful to see everyone here. I see smiles. Um, it's I just it's always wonderful to come together and pay some tribute to the Dharma in our time together. So, as you know, we're beginning our intensive practice period, and we're studying Dogen's Tenzo Kyōkun, instructions for the chief cook, during this time. And Tenzo means chief cook, and sometimes you'll hear the chief cook at Shasta Abbey referred to as the Tenzo. And Kyokun means instructions or something like that. So instructions for the chief cook. And this fascicle chapter piece by Dogen, which is only about 15 pages long, it's not long, so it's manageable, it's readable. It's not part of Dogen's Shobogenzo, but instead it comes from the Eihei Shingi. Eihei Shingi is the Chinese title of Rules of Purity of Eiheiji. Eiheiji was Dogen's temple in the last years of his life. Rules of Purity were rules written for monks and how to live their lives. And it's been translated by Taigen Dan Leighton and Shohaku Akamura. They call it Dogen's Pure Standards for the Zen Community. And you can actually read them in English. And as you know, Tenzo Kyōkun was completed in 1237 by Dogen, who was born in the year 1200. So he was 37 years old. And this is about 10 years after he had returned to Japan from his trip to China. Dogen went to China because he felt that Buddhism in Japan was corrupt and that in China he could find the true Zen. And he believed that he did. And as I started to say, rules of purity were written in every monastery at that time and were the rules and instructions by which monks lived and practiced in the monastery. You could actually say that the rules of Shasta Abbey are Shasta Abbey's pure standards for the Zen community. Now, what is striking to me about instructions for the chief cook is that it's really an instruction for how to live your life well based in Zen practice. And so it remains relevant up to this day, which is why we're studying it, because this just isn't about Dogen talking to cooks in Zen monasteries, but to all of us. There's a lot in it that we could talk about, as always, with our readings. I'm going to just confine myself to three main topics. The first one is everything is as precious as our eyeballs, and nothing is better than anything else. The second theme is our whole life is practice. And the third theme that I want to explore is the three minds, which Dogen talks about in the last 2 pages of Tenzo Kyōkun. So it's short, but the three minds are joyful mind, parental mind, and magnanimous mind. And, a lot of this is very simple and obvious stuff if you've been studying Buddhism, kind of basic. So I think, well, maybe you won't get anything out of this, but I hope that we all will get something out of this. I'm going to talk about those first 2 themes tonight, and the third one on the three minds, I'll talk about on Wednesday evening. I'm mostly going to be using Tom Wright's translation of the Tenzo Kyōkun, which is in this book. Well, I'm sorry, I have an old edition. This book is now called How to Cook Your Life. This is From the Zen Kitchen to Enlightenment, Refining Your Life. But Uchiyama Roshi, who is Shohaku Akamura's teacher, master, wrote this book, which is on your resource list, as a commentary on the Tenzo Kyōkun. So I'm going to be using mostly that translation, but also Reverend Master Jiu's translation, which is in Zen is Eternal Life. And I'll just bounce back and forth between them, and I won't tell you who. So if you're worried about it, ask me. Now, I have a question I'd like you to keep before you as we go through this week. And I think we'll revisit it next Monday. And that question is, what is the difference between an ordinary cook and a Tenzo? Between us cooking a meal and us cooking an enlightened meal? Between our ordinary lives and a life lived in the Dharma? What's the difference between the worldly mind and the enlightened mind? Is it just sitting, just cooking, letting go of concepts, letting go of ordinary values, or what? How do you think about that? I think that would be something to explore that would make this material more pertinent and fresh for us. I might also add that I have a bit of a personal agenda here, because to treat all things as precious, to not prefer one thing over another, to live my life as every moment Zen, has been important to me since long before I knew hardly anything about Buddhism or Zen, never mind being a monk. So these teachings are important to me, and I have a certain kind of love for them. So how precious are your eyeballs? Let's start there. And I want to begin, I'm going to quote Dogen a certain amount, and I'm going to begin with a couple quotes. In Tenzo Kyokun, he says, once he or they, the chief cook, has the rice, the vegetables, and other foods for the next day, they must handle them as carefully as if they were their own eyes. And later he says, rice must be cared for in the same way as we care for our own eyesight. Dogen also writes, when you prepare food, do not see with ordinary eyes and do not think with ordinary mind. Take up a blade of grass and construct a treasure king's land. Enter into a particle of dust and turn the great Dharma wheel. Do not arouse disdainful mind when you prepare a broth of wild grasses. Do not arouse joyful mind when you prepare a fine cream soup. Where there is no discrimination, how can there be distaste? Thus, do not be careless even when you work with your poor materials, and sustain your efforts even when you have excellent materials. Never change your attitude according to the materials. If you do, it's like varying your truth when speaking with different people. Then you are not a practitioner of the way. And that, by the way, is Kaz Tanahashi's translation. So sometimes eyes or eyesight, which were in the first two quotes, that gets translated as eyeballs. And I find this a very powerful translation because, treat the rice and vegetables as if they were your own eyeballs. I'm imagining them in my hand, my eyeballs in my hands, and how would I treat them if my eyeballs were in my hands? I'd be very careful and very loving and very caring. all on the assumption, of course, that I could put them back in my eyes and still see, right? So to me, this makes it, very direct and very physical, what's being spoken of here. And Dogen enjoins us to care for rice in the same way. And I think it's important to remember that rice was eaten at virtually every meal in Japan at that time. And that's actually still quite true. It was the most common of ingredients, but he encourages us to treat it as we would treat our own eyeballs. Now, here's another perspective on the use of this word eyes, which comes from another Japanese writer who says, when Dogen tells us to treat the monastery's possessions, its food, as if they were one's own eyeballs, he's not referring to one's ordinary eyes, but rather to the Buddha eye that correctly discriminates and understands all matters. Dogen is making a profound religious assertion. So the Buddha eye, we also call the third eye, which theoretically is located here on your forehead between your two eyes, and which can, in effect, see into spiritual matters more deeply than our regular eyes. So Dogen's making a profound religious assertion, all of which may be true. The third eye knows the undividedness of things. It knows Buddha nature. And so, yes, this is a religious assertion, and yet it's not separate from the physical eyes, and it's not greater than or less than the physical eyes. But it does give another dimension to the meaning of the word eyes. Dogen also says there's an old saying that goes, see the pot as your own head, see the water as your life blood. So now we have eyeballs, head, and blood. And the Tenzo should handle all food he receives with respect, as if it were to be used in a meal for the emperor. And later, he says, handle even a single leaf of a green in such a way that it manifests the body of the Buddha. This, in turn, allows the Buddha to manifest through the leaf. The Buddha manifesting through the leaf. What if we lived in this way? Can we handle our used toilet paper like a fine porcelain figurine? Or as the Buddha manifesting through it? Or as an expensive diamond ring? And I would encourage us all in the next few days to explore this possibility. Don't confine it to used toilet paper, please. Now, there's more to all of this. It's not enough to regard each thing as precious. Implied in this is a kind of necessary corollary that no one thing has more value than another. And we're not to discriminate things as higher or lower, liking and not liking, coarse and fine, expensive and cheap. Dogen's encouraging us to let go of that discrimination. And as I said, not value one thing more than another. I think that's a real challenge. He writes, the chief cook must not eye the food superficially or with a discriminatory mind. His soul, and this is Reverend Master Jiu's translation, and she used that word in spite of, Buddhist teaching. His soul, their soul, I'd like this to be gender neutral because women are Tenzos too, Their soul must be so free that the Buddha land appears within a blade of grass, whenever they and others behold it, and they must be capable of giving a great sermon even on the very heart of a particle of dust. They must not be contemptuous when making poor quality soup, nor be overjoyed when they make it with milk. If they are unattached to the last, they will not hate the first. For me, this came as a recognition that washing the dishes, this actually happened to me, washing the dishes was not less important than the work I was doing to finish my master's degree. And it was not to be hurried through so that I could get to my studies. And that recognition actually changed my life. Again, this happened to me before I knew hardly anything about Buddhism and certainly wasn't thinking of being a Buddhist or anything like that. But the recognition changed my life. For one thing, it meant that everything I did was to be done with equal care and attention, even love, if I may use that word. And also that I couldn't think I was highfalutin because I was getting a master's degree, or that I had more important things to do than wash the dishes, which ought to be relegated to inferior humans. It's kind of shocking, isn't it? This kind of thinking creates delusion and ultimately hatred. I think it's crucial for us to consider what we consider to be an inferior human. Is a terrorist who flies a plane into the Twin Towers an inferior human? Or how about the person who so kindly collects our garbage? Or someone who is fat or female or black? Are these inferior humans? When we discriminate, we fail to see the Buddha nature that flows through everything. And at what cost do we do that discriminating? I think we're always going to like one thing better than another. But I wonder, can we honestly love one person better than another? Who gets to decide about that? Equalizing our love is the heart of our practice. So I want to now turn a little bit to talking about our whole life as practice, which Dogen emphasizes over and over again in all of his writings. He says, if only we would step back to carefully reflect on the horse and the monkey. And if you've read Tenzo Kyōkun, you know the horse is about our mind. These animals are about our minds. The horse that charges forward, the monkey who swings from tree to tree, the way our thoughts and emotions come and go. So if we would step back to carefully reflect on the horse and monkey, our lives would naturally become one with our work. Doing so is the means whereby we turn things, even while simultaneously we are being turned by them. It is vital that we clarify and harmonize our lives with our work and not lose sight of either the absolute or the practical. So he's saying that all is in relationship. We turn things and we're turned by things. We cause other things or teach or move things, and things cause or teach or move us. If we think that only the absolute matters, and he's saying not to lose sight of either the absolute or the practical, that's that teaching that comes up in Buddhism quite often of the two truths, the universal, the absolute, the everyday, the particular, the practical. So if we think that only the absolute matters, the great enlightenment or Buddhahood, then we're in the trap of thinking in terms of higher and lower, better and worse. If we think that our cooking is only a matter of getting food on the table so we don't starve, we lose sight of Buddhahood. In fact, both are always arising together at once, both. If we can train our minds to be soft, flexible, kaleidoscopic, then we can hold both at once and live both at once. Dogen says, put your whole attention into the work, seeing just what the situation calls for. Seeing just what the situation calls for. And actually, when we're attentive, we do see what the situation calls for. That kind of naturally follows on our attentiveness. And this is how we see Buddha everywhere in all things, without a gap. So put your whole attention on what you're doing. This is a large part of the point that Dogen is making, this congruence between our practice and our life, that they're part of that they're the same thing, that practice is our whole life. It's part of the point he's making when he tells the stories about the chief cooks that he spoke with in China. So he tells 2 or 3 stories about chief cooks in China in Tenzo Kyōkun. So one day he's walking through the monastery and he finds one of them, an old man, drying mushrooms in the hot sun in the middle of the day. And he asks him why he doesn't have someone else do it, or why he doesn't do it at another time, or why he isn't in the meditation hall doing our practice rather than merely drying mushrooms. And why is someone so eminent a monk as he is outside drying mushrooms anyway? Again, isn't that a job for lesser people, inferior humans, as I called them earlier? And the cook says, in effect, if not now, when? And if not me, who? These cooks explain to Dogen that he doesn't know what practice is if he thinks it only takes place in the meditation hall or when reading the scriptures. Thich Nhat Hanh says, and this was in the article we read last Monday, and by the way, that article I see as a lead into our intensive practice period, and I hope you'll see how that's so. But in that article, Thich Nhat Hanh said, live deeply that moment of carrot cutting. It is as important as the practice of sitting meditation. It is as important as the practice of sitting meditation. It is as important as giving or hearing a Dharma talk. So again, what's being pointed at is this congruence, a complete congruence between our life and our practice. And that we're not doing practice part of the time and life the rest of the time. We do them both together. This theme, if you've looked at Ushiyama Roshi's book, How to Cook Your Life, this theme is really important to him. And he talks about it over and over again. The whole book's really about this. Over and over, he says, our practice is not somewhere else. It's not done at a special time. It's not some special activity. It is life meeting life. Our life meeting life with a capital L. I've noticed in the last little while that the Japanese monks who came to the US to teach here, in the early days of Zen coming over, and this wave of Zen coming over to America, love this word life. Our practice is life. And the aliveness and vitality of the practice, they stress this over and over again. So Uchiyama Roshi says, it is life meeting life. our life, meeting life with a capital L. Whatever we meet is our life. So are we going to be there for that or not? To be there for it means being there for every second of the day and night. Nothing left out. Nothing is base enough to ignore. So, Dogen was famous for saying, just sit, shikantaza, just sit. The Japanese like to say, just sit, just cook. Shikantaza, shikan tenzo. Nifty little play on Japanese words. Whatever you're doing, put all your energy into it. This is what they're pointing to. Do everything in a sacred manner and in celebration. Shikantaza, just sit. Shikantenzo, just cook. I, for some years now, have been living with, felt that our practice really, truly is just ordinary daily life. It's nothing other than getting up and brushing our teeth and sitting on the cushion and making our coffee and washing our dishes and cooking our meals and cleaning our house and going grocery shopping, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe practice isn't much more than that. It's not much more than ordinary daily life. It's really pretty mundane. And some of you will remember that Dogen writes in Rules for Meditation, which we've sometimes recited as our scripture. In the monastery, we theoretically recited it every day, noonday service, midday service. Anyway, Dogen writes in Rules for Meditation, this is the same as to live an ordinary daily life. And the this that he's referring to is meditation. So I'm drawing to a close here, and I hate to leave you on such a mundane note. I think, we'd like enlightenment with a capital E, flashes of light, fireworks, deep insights. We'd like all our problems to be resolved all at once and forever. That's my fantasy of enlightenment. From now on, life's going to be great. We'd like a heart as broad as the earth and a mind as wide as the sky. But I think that if we live our ordinary daily lives, as Dogen suggests in Instructions for the Chief Cook, we will find that it is just that, as broad as the earth and as wide as the sky. Now, I want to suggest, and this is the last thing I'll talk about, I want to suggest an exercise for us to do through this coming week. And in some ways, it's a bit of a takeoff on Pam's exercises regarding bowing that we did in December. And December, which was on bowing, really leads into the Tenzo Kyōkun and our study of it. And we can talk about that more at some point if you'd like to. But there was a monk at Antaiji. Antaiji was Ushiyama Roshi's temple in Japan. And this monk told Tom Wright, the translator of How to Cook Your Life, who was practicing there for a while, he said, it's not reading the Tenzo Kyōkun that is difficult. It's doing the Tenzo Kyōkun that takes all you've got. And Thich Nhat Hanh says, we can see making breakfast as mundane work or as a privilege. It just depends on your way of looking. And I like that word privilege. Can I see cooking breakfast as a privilege? Uchiyama Roshi says, when you put a pot down roughly, banging it around on concrete or a tiled sink, it cries out in pain. If you are still unable to hear that cry, then you can hardly be said to be a person living out zazen in your daily life. Now, that's a bit of a challenge to us all, I think. So, let this exercise be an antidote to cruelty and violence and an attempt to bring love and honor and respect into our world. The exercise is to pick something you do somewhat routinely. It should be something you do every day, so you have a little time with it. Something you tend to do mindlessly or carelessly without really thinking about it, like brushing your teeth, opening and closing doors, getting dressed, changing your clothes, making your bed, washing the dishes, or even cooking. And just take that one thing and practice bringing your whole attention to it and doing it with love and respect, without violence or harshness, with care and gentleness and kindness. You could even choose to do this with a person, treat a person with respect and kindness and care and attention. And I'm hoping that in the course of the week, we'll have time to talk about our experience with this exercise. So thank you all for listening.